All right, great. Hello, everybody, and welcome to pCloudy's webinar on the QA Professional's Guide to AI Prompt Engineering. My name is Dinakar, and I'll be the host for today. Before we get started, I would like to go over a few housekeeping rules. You may have noticed that your line is currently muted. If you do have any questions, you can submit them using the Q&A option available at the bottom of the screen. We will answer your questions as part of the Q&A section towards the end of the webinar. And also, please note that this webinar is being recorded, and we will send out the link of the recording to share with your colleagues later or watch it a second time. We also have a special giveaway for all our attendees today. We will be sharing a prompt engineering guide that is specifically designed for QA professionals like you. So with that said, let me hand it to our speaker. Let me introduce the speaker for today, Avinash Tiwari. Avinash is a renowned thought leader, a recognized keynote speaker, and the co-founder of pCloudy. He has 20 plus years experience in product development, testing, and recently in the AI space as well. He brings with him a passion for emerging technologies and quick adoption, both of which have solidified his reputation as a leader in the AI testing space. Without further ado, let me hand it to our speaker, Avinash Tiwari. Over to you, Anand.
Thank you so much, Dinakar, for introduction and setting up the rules. Welcome, everyone. Great to have you all here for this webinar. Thanks for taking out time at this hour. Maybe it's early morning for you. For some, it might be late evening. So thank you so much for finding time. AI is changing our world, and number of signups and participation for this webinar kind of reflects the change in the direction of the wind. So I am super excited to show you some details of the world to come, and also will try to give you a way to navigate in this new world. So let's get started. Back in 2023, when ChatGPT was launched, I was curious what the future will hold for all of us. And I was wondering how it's going to change the role of quality engineers in general testing and quality space. But having spent last 2 years building AI native tools, pCloudy is today fully agentic digital experience testing platform. I feel more confident and optimistic about the future of quality and testing. And that's what we are going to talk about and focus more on the specific area of prompt engineering. But you'll see a glimpse of what the future could look like. But before we kind of get into the actual specifics of the session that we are planning to talk about, let's do a quick thought experiment. Of course, I can't see you. So whether you close your eyes or you do it without closing your eyes, it's up to you. But I want you to just spend 10 minutes thinking, 10 seconds, sorry, just 10 seconds thinking about what all announcements, what all tools that you came across, what news that you came across in last 30 days related to AI. Just last 30 days. I'm not asking about 1 year or 6 months. Just think about whatever news or announcements or tool releases that you came across in last 30 days. So just for 10 seconds, so countdown begins. Hope you could think many. I mean, as far as I am concerned, I could think of so many announcements, so many interesting news. For example, ChatGPT 5 was released a few days back. Google VO, a video generation platform, was released almost a month back, and it's already transforming the video industry. Google also released Gemini AI preview in Google search, and whole SEO industry is scrambling for answers. Lovable, a prototype app development platform, reached $100 million of revenue in just 7 days, just 7 months, with handful of folks. And I could go on and talk about all the changes which happened in just last 30 days. What I want to point out here is the pace of change that we are seeing around us is overwhelming, and it's accelerating as we speak. So the transformation with AI isn't coming, it's already here. So with that being said, or with that as fact, I just want to take a step back and talk about why AI is different from some of the other technology waves that we have seen in past. And I call it, I would like to term it as the leverage equation. AI is not just a tool, it's a leverage. In past, we have come across many technology waves. We saw many tools, productivity enhancements, but most of these were linear in nature. So you add a tool, you get proportionate result. You add more people, you get proportionate results. But with AI, what we are seeing is an exponential leverage. So one person with AI can give you 100x output. And I'm not joking here. 100x is something people are already talking about. If you have heard about Y Combinator, they have released a new thesis where one of the theme is 10 people, $10 billion company. So just imagine the scale and the exponential nature of AI world that people are already envisioning. Now, we can see this in real world examples as well, especially in marketing, development velocity, in many industries. For example, in finance, the fraud detection has become a task of few seconds, which was unthinkable beforehand. In medical science, the diagnosis has become so easy with the help of AI. So it's happening all across in different industries that we see around. The question is what's happening to QE, right? And that's the question mark. I have it here, that what kind of leverage that we can have in the field of QE. Of course, I'm not going into detail of the different aspects of change in the quality engineering, because that's not focus of the session, but you'll see a glimpse of what is needed for QE to transform and become relevant in the coming world or the coming future. Now, one of the other thing that I want to talk about before we get into the specifics is what is the paradigm shift here and what is this leverage that we are talking about? One of the change that has happened with AI is English has become the new programming language. So it's no more about writing code, or maybe in space of QE, writing test cases. It's about describing what you want, right? For example, test your checkout process with edge cases. You give context and it can generate variety of test cases that you need. And that is so powerful. We are feeling threatened about it, but that's so powerful. It's elevating each of us to become a builder than a doer. So all of us today have an opportunity to become a builder from what we are right now today, right? I mean, for example, if you want to build something, and if you don't know coding, right? In the previous era, you were constrained. You need to go and talk to some developer to help you. Today, you can do vibe coding and build something and show it to the world. It has become so easy for you. So if you have an idea, bringing that idea to execution has become so simple, right? So we all can become a builder. That's the whole power of this leverage that I was talking about in the previous slide. And if everyone can become a builder and become more creative, you can generate so much more. And that's the optimistic nature of this change that we are talking about. So QE would not require to write tests in future, in few years from now. they will have to guide AI. They need to become a strategist, and that's some of the glimpse of it is what we are going to see today in the session as we move forward. Now, uh, and continuing from what I just talked about, Andres Karpathy, one of the earlier co-founder of OpenAI, he has been one of the most prominent figure in this space, and he said that one of the most valuable skill won't be coding. Like I said, English is the new programming language. It's all about communicating with AI, right? So how do you communicate effectively with AI is one of the primary skill that everyone needs today in any field, be it development, coding, marketing, sales. We all need to learn how to communicate with AI. And when we talk about communicating with AI, that brings us to this whole era, I mean, the whole area of prompt engineering. Right? Now, how do you communicate with AI? Whether you are building an agent, agentic platform, building workflows, or directly interacting with an LLM through a chat interface, you are in some form communicating with the AI, and that form is your prompts. How do you define the prompts? How do you write the prompts? Defines the success of whatever you are trying to build. Beyond the other engineering skill, one of the key skill is to write those prompts, create those system prompts, etc., to be able to communicate with AI. Right? That's what prompt engineering is all about. In a nutshell, how we are going to communicate with AI. So to understand this whole prompt engineering skill set, it's also important to understand what's under the hood. And if we understand that, I think the rest of the part becomes much easier to grasp and uh, to build something on top of what we'll understand what's under the hood will become much easier. So I'll spend some time explaining what's under the hood. So just be with me for another 5-10 minutes before we jump into the prompt engineering specifics. So some basics we all know. AI is not new. It has been there in the market for long. We had computer vision, machine learning, traditional artificial intelligence from quite some time, from last at least 20 years. A generative AI has been there in the market for quite some time. We all have used Google Translate, and Google Translate is an example of generative AI, which is there from last 10, 12 years. Using NLP, we have seen you enter a text in English and you can generate a text in French or Spanish or whatever language that you want. So it's generating a content. So generative AI has been there in some form. But what has been new is this whole large language models or language models, which has kind of changed the game and taken generative AI to another level where we all can interact so easily, and it has democratized the access of AI. And within the LLM space, there are two key concepts. One is foundation model, and using foundation model, building a language model. So language model is all about data, architecture, and training. So I'm not getting into the architecture piece of it today, but we'll talk a little bit about data and training because that is the basis of how a prompt can be created, right? So if you understand that part, I think the rest of the concept becomes very, very easy to understand. So diving a bit deeper into language modeling, the concept of language modeling is all about predicting what comes next, right? So for example, if you give a sentence to a language model, for example, continuous testing, shifts testing 2, it might give you left or early, right? So given the sequence of words so far, predicting what comes next is the core of any language model. And it has been there for some time. Now, the new architecture that came as transformer model, if you have heard about, that changed the game in making the prediction much more accurate at a very large scale in any format. So that's where we are talking about language models here. So again, you feed the context and the sequence of words, and it predicts, it creates the probability of the next words, and whatever is the highest probability, you get as the next word. That's the fundamental of any language modeling. Now, on language modeling, there are other steps that happens so that you are able to interact in a much more instruction format, the way we are used to talking to ChatGPT and all. Now, how do we reach that stage is critical to understand. I'll try to explain it quickly. And that happens through a process called training. And that is divided into three parts. The first part is what we call it pre-training. The first section that you see, pre-training stage, where the model is fed a huge corpus of data, trillions of parameters or trillions of data sets, depending on what you tune. It could be smaller data set as well. But if you consider ChatGPT, they have kind of scanned probably the whole internet, trillions of data sets. And you can go and look at open crawl data set on Hugging Face and all, and you get some understanding of what's the volume of data set that we're talking about. So model is fed in a raw format, all that data which exists in those kind of data sets I was talking about, for example, open crawl, right? You get a foundation model. And the foundation model can only predict next word. It can't predict a complete structured output that we see in interaction with ChatGPT or Claude. That happens in the second stage, which is called supervised fine-tuning, where you teach model how to interact. And this is another massive exercise where millions of question-answer pairs are created to teach the model that if a particular type of question is asked, you need to answer in a particular format. And when that SFT happens, model understands that, okay, if someone asks a question, I need to respond it in a particular way, right? That is called tuned model, where the model is ready to interact with the user and answer a much more structured responses. I want to focus I want to focus a bit on this whole supervised fine-tuning concept, because that is important to understand for building right kind of prompts. And the last part is reinforcement learning, where you teach the model what is right answer, what is wrong answer. You generate multiple responses from an LLM and then tell the model through human feedback, or now we have reward models to tell that this particular response is better, this particular response is maybe less accurate. So model understands that these kind of responses are better. We are not going into this part in detail, just understand that it gives a model a sense of what is good and bad. So these are the three steps that happens. And again, there are multiple approaches, but largely these are the three steps that you will see in any kind of model training. Once these three steps are done, you get something like ChatGPT. So you can use an open source model, add your data, do supervised training, and then create your own open source LLM or SLM. So this is the stage where you get something like ChatGPT. Now, I want to focus specifically on this SFT. What is SFT, right? Like I said, you create question and answer pair. So for example, this is one of the math question, right? So where you create input-output pair, and like I said, it will be millions of pairs that you'll create across. Depending on what kind of model you're training. It's a generic model, you'll have math questions, you will have general knowledge questions, and all sorts of Q&A pairs. So for example, this is a simple math question that Julie is reading a 120-page book. Yesterday, she was able to read 12. So how much, if she wants to read half of remaining pages tomorrow, how many pages should she read? Now, output could be just the answer of this question, right? So you can create input-output pair in a format where you have a question and you directly give output as the answer as one of the Q&A pair for training. That's one way to train the model. And it was one of the early way of training the models where you just created these kind of pairs and did your SFT. So model understands what should be the answer. Now, but model here doesn't understand how you are calculating the answer, right? And that is where the next research came, where in the output pair, you started explaining how the answer has been achieved, how the 42 was achieved. So like you solve a math paper, you are writing the answer explaining how you achieved 42, right? And this was the first time done by DeepSeek in a much more detailed way. And that was start of reasoning models, where when you are training, you're not just providing a simple Q&A pair, you are talking about how to reach that response. And it's not just about math. For example, it could be an input output pair. What is gravity on a moon, right? So you can say moon's gravity is 1/6 of Earth's gravity, or you can explain more the reason of that part before you talk of the final answer in the output pair. So that is how now the reasoning models are being trained, right? And it's important just keep that in mind, because this kind of this will help you understand why we are writing prompts in a particular way, right? So nowadays, I want to repeat this again. This is extremely important, that most of the training happens by providing the reasoning traces, as we call it in the model language, as part of the input output pair when the model training is happening. And millions of such Q&A pairs will be created. Now, another aspect that we need to keep in mind under the hood, model settings. Now, you might not be looking at these settings because you are interacting with ChatGPT. They've already done a lot of fine tuning and they have arrived at parameters. But if you're interacting with the APIs of, for example, OpenAI, you might be interacting with these settings. Or if you're training open source model, you'll have to set that. And these impacts your output, so you need to understand what these parameters are. So for example, there is one important parameter of a model is temperature, right? Now, a temperature closer to 0 means a more focused, concentrated response. It's good for fact-based prompts. But if you want to write, for example, a blog or a creative article or a poem, you want model to be much more flexible, broaden its area. So you can set the temperature high. So temperature low means more focused response. Temperature high means more wider response. So depending on the kind of work that you are doing, you can set the temperature. Max tokens. Max tokens is all about how much maximum tokens you want in your response. This is also important from the costing perspective, because more tokens cost you more if you are using, let's say, APIs and all, right? So depending on what kind of task that you are doing, you can set the number of tokens. This aspect is another important parameter, top P, right? So top P value, again, is related to focused and confident response due to limited choice of tokens available. So if you want a very focused fact-based task, you can set this value as low. If you want a more creative kind of response, you can set higher top P. So these are certain model parameters that we need to keep in mind to make sure that we know that, okay, if you're not getting right output, this could be also another area to look at, right? So just keep these under the hood concepts in mind. With that, I think we are all set to discuss how do we write good prompts, or what is prompt engineering. I'll skip this part. We have discussed it. But what are the good prompt engineering techniques that you should be looking at? And for that, you need to understand the anatomy of a good prompt, right? Or prompt. So if you look at all the recommendations given by OpenAI or other models, a prompt is typically divided into 5 different components: role, context, instruction, success criteria, and input data. Now, let's look at this as with an example. So for example, this is one of the prompt. And the prompt says that as a QA engineer, which is the role, with expertise in web accessibility and security testing, you are giving the context that I'm going to talk more about accessibility and security testing in the task, right? Then the actual instruction, what do you want the prompt to do for you. So generate comprehensive test cases for a financial service registration form, right? And then that must comply with, which is more like a success criteria, and your input data, that across these areas, I want to generate my test cases. Now, I can write a simple prompt that give me test cases for a financial service registration form for accessibility testing. That would be another prompt. And that's how probably we have been trying. That's not the most optimum way, because the output that you'll get will differ significantly from the prompt if you try this prompt. Because this follow the structure a model expects, right? Because model has been trained in this way. When we talk about SFT, in SFT, all this is part of the input-output pairs that we were talking about. That for what is the role, what is the input, what is the output, there are contexts. I mean, it's a broad area that we can get into, but this is how an ideal prompt should be, right? You need to have all the components in place to make sure that the model understands it well, and then you get a better outcome. Let's dive a bit deeper around different techniques. And there are three main techniques that we have seen in the prompt engineering space. The first is the most simplest one, which we all have been using for any task that comes to our mind. We go and just try a zero-shot prompting, right? So zero-shot prompting is the most basic kind of prompt engineering, where you ask the LLM to perform a task without providing any kind of example, just straightforward. And it's more suited for simple, well-defined tasks. For example, I can go and ask for a definition. Give me, I mean, what is continuous testing, right? Or tell me, how do I create a different set of data for a password field with these many characters? Very simple tasks. You need quick results. You don't require too much of domain knowledge. The model doesn't require too much domain knowledge to perform that task. So for those kind of examples, zero-shot prompting is relevant, and you can go ahead and use it. Just to kind of get into more detail of what a zero-shot prompting is, here it's about no example, no input. And this is one simple example that classify this statement to a positive or negative statement. The cookie doesn't taste good. The model output is negative. So it's a very simple, straightforward, fact-based task and response that we're talking about. So it is good for, like I said, simple tasks, not suitable for complex tasks, struggles with specialized tasks, which requires domain understanding or reasoning to be done. Not good for long form content. For example, if you want to generate a blog or a technical article, if you just say that generate an article on a particular topic is not good enough. The outcome will not be great, and you will have to do again prompting, etc., to make sure that it meets your expectation. So we can avoid zero-shot prompting if we are talking about complex and long form content kind of tasks. And another, I mean, example of a simple zero-shot prompt specifically in case of a testing scenario is list all the test cases needed for a password strength validator that requires minimum 8 character, this and that. So model is able to generate this without any context or without other details to be added in this prompt engineering. So simple zero-shot prompting works for it. But moving on to the other technique, which is used more frequently, and I think we all have learned to use it. You might be using it already, few-shot prompting. And the key aspect of the few-shot prompting is providing multiple examples to establish pattern. So it's good for complex test scenarios. And let's see one example of it. So this is how the few-shot prompting is structured. You provide some examples and then your input, the task that you want to do. So for example, you are giving an example to the prompt. Best product ever means a positive sentiment. It didn't work for me, not happy, negative sentiment. What a scam, don't buy, negative sentiment. And then you say, this is my input. This is so helpful. Love it. Give me the sentiment. So based on the examples that we have given, the model understands what do you mean by positive and negative sentiment in your context, and then give you response as positive. So by giving you, by providing examples to the model, you are allowing model to understand the pattern that you are looking at. And based on that pattern, model gives you answer in your context. So you can get much better outcomes with a few short prompting examples. For example, I think the slide is slightly misplaced here. So this is one example. For example, I'm trying to create a validation test for credit card number field, which is the bottom input I'm trying to provide as part of the prompting. But I have given examples of what are the validation tests, what are the valid inputs, what are the invalid inputs for email, for phone numbers, and then asking that, okay, create validation test for credit card number field. So now the model understands what exactly are you looking at from valid or invalid kind of examples. And based on that, the model will generate the output. So this is called few shot. So whatever is your task that you want the model to generate output for, you give some examples which you think are right results for you. And this is used extensively in any kind of, for example, agentic systems that you build. So you tell agents that, okay, this is what the task is, and these are some few short examples that you can refer to provide the output. And it need not be limited to 2, 3. You can have more few short examples. It depends on the context length. And again, it adds to the cost because more context length, more tokens, and it adds to the cost. So you can have an optimum number of few short examples depending on the kind of task that you are looking to perform. So with that, I think we are coming to the most important and the recent development, chain of thought prompting, right? And this approach is again, you can go back and remember what I talked about in the supervised fine tuning, that we can create an input-output pair where input is a question and the output is the direct answer, versus the output has a reasoning trace as to how did you achieve that answer. That is nothing but a chain of thought. You are asking model to have a chain of thought before reaching an answer. And you can apply the same principle in your prompting as well. You are forcing the model to think in a certain way. That's what is chain of thought prompting is all about. And this is the most effective way of getting the right outcome. Of course, it's required for a complex task. You don't require for a simple, like we saw other examples. But most of the work that we are doing today requires this kind of thinking. How do I create the right chain of thought kind of prompt to achieve the best outcome from the model? And also when you are writing agents, etc., chain of thought becomes the most important and effective way of writing the prompts. Let's see an example here. Again, this is like a math example where you have model input and model output straightforward. But here what I'm doing is with the question, I am giving an example of an answer and how to think about it. So this is an example of a kind of few shot prompting. For one question and answer, I am already adding in the prompt, and then I'm asking the other question. When I do that, the model understands that I need to think in this way. I need to apply this reason before I answer the question. That is exactly what chain of thought prompting is. And we can look at more examples of this. For example, in this case, let's think step by step about testing an e-commerce checkout process. I can just say that and stop it. That becomes my zero-shot prompting. The model will generate some outcome. But here what I'm doing is I'm asking model to think step by step, and I'm giving an example of what is step by step. So first, because what happens is if you just say it might generate for few components and it might miss certain components. Then again, you have to see what it has missed and then add your clarifications and then try to generate it again and again. Instead, I can ask the model to think about all the components involved. It's a simple example. I can add more in this chain of thought reasoning that, okay, think about component, think about testing types. You can also add what are the testing types you should think about. Think about these kind of use cases. So you can give a step-by-step way of thinking to the model, and the model will perform the task in that particular fashion itself. And that is proven to be the most effective way of generating outcomes through a prompt engineering process. Other examples, for example, and you can also nowadays you can use think tokens, but okay, you can just ignore this for the time being. You can say consider a multi-step registration form with these steps, right? And then ask what are the possible user paths. I can just say that, okay, there is multi-step registration form with username and password. Go ahead and create the edge cases for me. And rather than that, I'm asking the prompt to go step by step and then create the test cases for, right? So again, simple examples. We'll look at some complex ones as well. Another example in case of, let's say, API security, you're again asking the model to think about all these aspects in a step-by-step way, in a sequence before answering the question. So that is typically a chain of thought way of generating prompts. Now, we have discussed most of it. There are some optimization techniques, again, linked to what we discussed in terms of few shot, in terms of zero shot and chain of thought. But to give you a more specific way of thinking, there are 3 optimization techniques. Enhance the context. Again, you can link it to what we just discussed. So for example, you can say generate a test case for a form, right? This is poor prompt because you're not providing any context. I am adding my role as a QA engineer, generate test case for a registration form. I am providing better context. It's better than the previous one. But we can reach a much better state by adding more context. Like I said, you are a senior QA engineer with expertise, generate comprehensive test cases across these compliance requirements, consider both functional and non-functional requirements. So I'm adding more context to the prompt, which provides better output. So enhancing the context is one way of optimizing the prompt. Format the output. And again, this is a few shot. You can go link it to few shot. That what happens a lot of times is we generate and then the output is in not the right format that we are looking at. Okay, generate the test case and it generates the test case in a bullet point format. That's not good enough for you, right? You want test case in a tabular format with these 5 fields, serial number, steps, expected output, and things like that. You can provide an example of the output that you are looking at, right? So generate the test cases for a login functionality in this format, test case ID, title, step 1, step 2, and things like that. And again, you can add more context to it. So formatting the output is another way to improve and optimize the prompt. And the third way is defining the constraint. Because what happens is when you write a prompt, the model can go absolutely broad and give you so much result that you are overwhelmed. You can restrict by giving it the constraints. And that is how we think in QA, right? We look at, okay, what are the data sets that we should be testing for, positive, negative data sets. So you can give those constraints to the model as well. So for example, generate test cases for a file upload feature with these output constraints, maximum file size, allowed formats, and this and that. I mean, you can have that list. So defining the constraints give you much more accurate result and much more usable output, if I can say it correctly. So with all that, I mean, we saw different prompting techniques, we saw optimization techniques. What would be an ideal prompt? And this guideline was released by ChatGPT few days back, ChatGPT 5 few days back. This is one of the ideal prompt which I generated as for a QA professional, right? Taking one example of, let's say, the core task is create a comprehensive QA test plan for two-factor authentication for login feature in a mobile banking app. I can just say, go ahead and create a QA test plan for me for this feature and leave it and let the model generate. I'll get output. But how do I improve this to make it the ideal prompt where I get the best output from the model, right? And we are using all the techniques that we discussed so far. One is we are using all the components of a prompt. So it starts with a role, right? So you can read here. I'm not sure the font is visible. I hope it is. But just to give you a quick summary, in role, we are specifying that act as a senior quality assurance specialist with 15 years of expertise in functional, non-functional, and digital experience testing of web, mobile, etc. Right? Then we talk about task, and in task, we are talking about different areas that can include functional, negative, boundary, non-functional scenarios. So we are asking the model to think in those stepwise rather than just going very broad. Then we are providing context. Okay, what kind of application it is, what kind of context is present for this for the model to generate this QA test plans. For example, what is the application type? What kind of environment are we talking? What kind of tech stack, compliance, other constraints, dependencies, and you can add more, right? And that is where the new skill of a QE is expected. Rather than writing individual test cases, you need to write these ideal prompts, and as whoever writes in a better format, whoever writes better context, better task description will get a better output. The fourth block is reasoning, where you are asking model to reason it in certain way. So plan must validate that two-factor authentication is secure, reliable, user-friendly, performant. You can add more, include positive, negative, and edge test cases. So these are the four components that we discussed in the beginning as well, and we saw a glimpse of it in different techniques that we talked about. Finally, the output format, right? I mean, this continuation of the prompt, because it's so big that I couldn't fit it in one slide. So continuation of the previous prompts. I'm also giving the output format that I need the test plan in this format with these fields. And then finally, constraint that, okay, when this condition meets, you can stop. When all the functional negative boundary condition is listed, you have added risk mitigation strategy, you have added automation plan, compliance checks, etc. This combined thing is one ideal prompt. So we are moving away from just asking models to generate with single line questions to giving it in a way that the models can generate right optimum output for you. Because models are designed to think in this particular way, right? So if you understand those components and use it to your advantage, you can generate amazing outputs, right? And with that, I think you can also think about how the roles are changing, right? You might not be required to write actual test cases. In some cases, very complex, domain-intensive applications where the models are not having that kind of knowledge, you might require. But in most of the scenarios that we come across, probably the manual test case writing or even the automation code generation will not be so much needed, but you will require to write right kind of prompts, train your agents to perform the task in a accurate way is the expectation we are looking at from all quality engineers or SDATs or whatever roles that exist today in the quality world. Now, there are a few don'ts. I think we have covered most of it in our previous techniques as well. So no vague prompts. We saw that without context and without success criterias or some of the other components that we talked about. These are don'ts, but I think we have covered it in pretty much detail. So with that, I think we have come to the end of this session. I want to just conclude with that thought again, that we the AI is changing our role from doers to builders, right? You can see the kind of creativity that you can apply using some of the techniques that we are talking about. We all can become strategist here, right? You don't have to be, let's say, in today's world, of 15 years experience to write a test plan. If you can write a good prompt, you can generate a test plan, even if you have, let's say, few years of experience. So it's allowing all us to be more creative, become builder, and that will be so powerful in the future to come. So with that thought, I think we have a giveaway as well. You can, whatever we discussed is also part of the prompt engineering guide that we have created. So you can download and look at it in your free time, and also provide your feedbacks on that. Thank you so much for listening. I hope it was useful, and you got some insights into how to be more effective and how to communicate effectively with AI, because that's the skill set we all need. I mean, I don't think we can say that, why should I do that? It's a choice. It's not a choice now. It's a mandate that we all need to start behaving like AI engineers. That's the expectation which is there in front of us. So thank you so much for listening, and we are open to question and answer if you have any. If you're not able to answer all the questions, we will respond on emails. I'll be happy to take up as much as I can in the time which is left for us. So Dinakar, over to you.
All right, great. Thank you, Avinash. Thank you so much. Well, we do have a few questions that are pouring in. I'm just going to give it a few minutes while that's happening. Also, just so that all of our participants are aware, we have posted you know, the engineer's guide, the QA engineer's guide for prompt engineering. So you can download that from the chat box, using the link, or you can just click on the download button. The file is right there for you to use and go through. With that, let me just quickly look at our questions. One of the questions that we have is, Avinash, how do you balance AI-generated test coverage with human review to ensure quality? I think this is more like the post using the prompt, but yes.
Yeah. No, that's, I mean, I kind of uh, briefly touched upon that part, that we all are becoming strategists. And in that role, our job is about reviewing, looking at deeper insights than executing routine tasks, right? Uh, and my feeling is that human in the loop is the best approach which will work in the future, um, that is in front of us. Whether we are directly interacting with LLMs, or whether we are becoming, whether we are writing agentic workflows, there'll be human in the loop approach, where whatever is generated by the model will be, the humans will have an oversight of that, and final approval will be done by humans before it moves to the next stage. So that is extremely important. So you're right. I think we all need to use the skills that we have to review, and then give a final go ahead to the next stage of whatever that we are generating. It could be test coverage, it could be test plan, it could be automation scripts, execution workflows. I mean, for example, once the automation report is generated, AI can also log bugs, but you can always have human in the loop to review the bugs, finalize whether it has to be triaged, it has to be sent to devs. That human insight will be needed at all stages. So I think hope I have answered that question.
Absolutely. Well, just another question here. Are there any generic prompts for testers that one can use to get the best results?
I don't believe in generic prompts, and that's the reason I kind of focused on one of the ideal prompt, where you can follow the strategy to create your ideal template, right? Once you have been able to generate your ideal template, you can use it for various tasks, right? But that ideal template requires certain aspects which is contextual to you, right? For example, the kind of application, the context of the application, the constraints, the type of testing that you want to do, or type of task that you want to perform. That is very specific to your environment, your context. So you need to learn the strategies and the components to be included. And based on that, you need to build. I would not suggest generic prompts to anyone. That's the reason we focused on kind of talking about the strategies. How do we write the good prompts? And once you know the strategy, it becomes much more simpler for you to use that in your uh, task or in your context. So I would suggest to go and look deeper into these strategies than look at generic prompts.
We have another question. How do you see prompt engineering changing the role of a QA tester in next 2 years?
I think I have kind of answered that as part of my discussion itself. We are becoming more QE strategist, QE reviewers than executors. And this requires a very strong prompt engineering skills. And this is not just for interaction with models, right? Where you are uh, talking about specific tasks. For example, you might be required to write agents. And when you write agents, the first thing that you need to do is to write the system prompt to the agent. And some of the skills that we talked about is what you need to write the system prompt, right? So whether you are directly interacting with the model, writing agents, creating workflow, this is one of the core skill that you need, right? And this has become essential part of our jobs. I think if someone is not adopting this, there is definitely a threat. But if we adopt it, as I said, we all have an opportunity to become builders here and provide much more output to our teams, to the to the organization, create our, and do our jobs much faster with a scale which is unprecedented. So it's one of the core skills that we all need to learn, whether in testing or in any other area, right? So as I said, we all have to become AI engineers in that sense by understanding how do we communicate with LLM through prompt engineering, and then some of the other skill sets which are needed.
Okay. We have another question from Anuj. Is prompt engineering skill role will be fading in upcoming years as the new AI models are getting better at understanding vague or incomplete statements?
I mean, this is evolving, but there will be some. The maybe the format of the prompts will change, but without context, without right inputs, whatever new model comes to the market, I don't think you will be able to get the outcome that you are looking at, right? Um, even after reasoning models came into play, right? We were dealing with pre-reasoning era, direct chat GPT. Even after pre-reasoning, the prompting has become much more complex because we are expected to write those steps, the context. Otherwise, you will get the output, but you will struggle to find the right output. You will end up spending more time um, uh, answering clarification questions or having multi-shot prompting to reach your outcome. Rather, if you write the prompts in a particular way, and the prompt engineering skill set will evolve, as someone is pointing out rightly that the new models will come. But I feel that a way of communication will always exist until we reach a stage where maybe AGI comes into play, and that's a threat to humanity itself. But until that happens, I think we will require to learn and communicate to the model. That communication process will change, prompting skills will change. Like in any other skill set, we keep learning new things, but the reality is that we need to learn to communicate with the models. And there is more work. There are more use cases coming up with this skill set. So I don't see that we'll not be able to utilize this skill in next at least uh, 5 years or so.
We agree, Anush. Yeah. And
Sorry,
we
I'm
have
not
one.
sure if you're able to hear me. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
All right, great. For some reason, I mean, some technical glitches are going on and my video is off, not able to
No
get that
worries.
back on. But the questions, I mean, Rohit, were you able to kind of finish up, or were there a few more questions that we need to answer?
Yeah, one last question we got from Ganesh. It's which LLM can be used for this for better results?
I mean, it's a choice of the enterprise that you are working with. I mean, at an individual level, I mean, um, Claude or ChatGPT are the two best models that exist. But there are so many open source ones which are extremely good, like DeepSeek and Llama and Pen. So depending on um, what's the context that you have, can you use open source models? Are you allowed to use public models? So depending on the organization policy and the task that you're looking at, you can choose. But if you don't have a preference, OpenAPI, ChatGPT, or Anthropic Claude are the two options that you can look at to start. Very easy to use, and yeah, you can use some of the skills that we talked about to get started on. Great. I think we are out of the time. We will conclude the session for today, and we'll answer some of the questions if we haven't been able to answer it right now. We can send it through email. We can reach out to the specific individual on email. With that, I would like to conclude. Thank you so much for being so patient and asking relevant questions. Yeah, thank you.